Today, we're going to be talking about behavior modification to reinforce those rules and those expectations and those routines. So before we get started, let's go ahead and pray. Heavenly Father, we thank you for this wonderful day that you've given us. Thank you, Lord, that you've provided these opportunities to learn and grow in our teaching styles and our understanding of how to teach students about you. I pray, Father, that you would help these routines to be effective and easily transmittable to our own classrooms. I pray that something would speak to each and every one of us so that we can help to adapt it to our own classrooms and make them more successful and effective, Lord. I pray that you give us the right heart when we're choosing the strategies we're using with our students, and I pray, Father, that you give us discernment to know what our students need and when, so they can learn more about you. Lord, we're so grateful for you, and we're thankful that you've, again, just given us this time of fellowship and learning. It's in your holy, precious name we pray. Amen. Okay, so we have to remember why we want effective classroom management and student behavior. Our main goal is to make sure that our students can learn. We want to provide that environment for them to be able to learn. We want to reduce as many distractions as possible so that they can learn. It's not about controlling students for the sake of making them good students. It's about helping them to be good students so that they can learn what it is we need to teach them. And so we have to keep that at the forefront of our mind. Every single strategy we use must be used in an effort to redirect our students back to the task or learning goal. And this applies to all students, even the difficult ones, even more so sometimes, right? They're the ones that need to learn this behavior modification the most so they can learn the lesson we're trying to teach them the most. We want our classrooms to run smoothly. We want to maintain control. We want to have good classroom and student behaviors. And I'm hoping that these will be practical strategies that you can use in your classroom to reduce the undesirable behaviors and even prevent them. We also want to correct and redirect students when they don't give us the right behaviors. And that way we can maintain a positive learning environment for our students and create opportunities for them to learn. Most importantly, we want to make sure that our behavior modification is used so that we can build godly behavior in our students. We want them to learn obedience. We want them to learn self-control. And we want them to be able to learn about Jesus, most importantly. So, just to reiterate, behavior management and modification is to help reinforce our routines, to help reinforce our rules, to help reinforce our expectations, so that they become normal and part of the student's behavior. And they can learn to be less disruptive and they can have more opportunities for learning. So on the first section you see there, it says behavior management strategies, long-term modifications. These are strategies we can use to help prevent undesired behaviors. We want to give them strategies that they can use and that they can monitor their own behaviors with so that they have a measure for how well or lack thereof they're doing with a specific behavior or rule or expectation. So all of the different things that you see down here in my examples, they're all things that we can use to measure a student's behavior in the classroom, whether they're positive or negative. And it should be an indicator for students of their level of self-control and obedience to whatever that rule or desired expectation is, or behavior. So, having a behavior management strategy or system that is visible and tangible for students helps them to monitor their own behavior with the hope that they will self-correct before you have to correct them. And that way they don't have to be redirected by the teacher. Students are automatically intrinsically motivated by the idea that they can receive a reward for good behavior. If they are trying to earn something, they will self-correct most of the time. Now, for a kid who rarely earns something and has no hope of ever earning something, that might not be as effective. So there are ways to deal with that. But most of the time when a student is trying to earn something and you're giving them a measure for how close they are to earning that reward, more times than not, they're going to come up to you and they're going to be more likely to tell you, did you see what I did? I did this. I fulfilled the expectation. And that way you're going to give them whatever the little reward is, right? So some examples of these measures are behavior charts with stickers or stamps. I'm sure you guys have seen those before. It's just a little chart, piece of paper, and it's got a bunch of boxes on it. And anytime they exhibit the desired behavior, they follow the rule, they complete the task, they use manners, whatever it is that you're asking them to do, you can reward them with a sticker. Now, the sticker itself isn't the reward, but the collection of the stickers is when they receive a reward. So all of these will build up to an end product being the reward. This is just a management system, right? Another example would be the red, yellow, green. Does anyone use that in their classrooms? Red, yellow, green. It's usually like a stop sign or a signal light looking thing. And green means that they've got good behavior. Yellow means that they've received a warning, or that they've broken a rule, or something has happened that they're not behaving the way they should be behaving or what's expected. And then red means you're done for the day. You're going to receive a consequence most times, whatever that consequence might be. Another example would be play money classroom economy. This is effective for many different reasons. You get play money. They earn money to spend in maybe a classroom store. And every time they complete their tasks or the agreed upon expectations to receive money, you pay them with the fake money, and then they get to then spend that money in whatever capacity you allow them to spend that, whether it's free time, something that they enjoy doing, or if it's an actual toy or candy or tangible thing. You can also do behavior coupons. Behavior coupons, they could be to enforce positive behaviors. In one school that I worked for, we called them PAWS, and it was an acronym for something else, positive behavior, positive attitudes, or something like that. And it's sort of like a we caught you being good kind of coupon, and you get to use that coupon maybe as a homework pass, or maybe as a bathroom pass, or something that you really desire to do. You can do collecting objects. You can give students marbles every time they do the desired behavior that you want them to do, and then when they fill their jar to a certain point, they get a prize. We have a teacher at our school that she uses marshmallows. She has mini marshmallows and she has giant marshmallows. And when I think the way it works is if they have individual students earn specific marshmallows, they get a little one in a collective jar as a class. And then if all the students turn in all of their work for a specific assignment, they get the giant marshmallow. And they're on her jar in her classroom. This is more of like a community collection rather than an individual student collection. She has different rewards for every time they fill the jar to the area that she wants them to fill. And so I think the ultimate one is like a pizza party. And of course they want a pizza party. So they help to encourage each other, and then it's a community effort. You can also do fuzzies. I've seen, you guys know the little pom-poms? I've seen teachers use those for when students, like, for example, exhibit the fruit of the Spirit. And every time, because they're like warm and fuzzies, is kind of like the idea. And every time they exhibit the fruit of the Spirit, they get a fuzzy. They get to put it either in their jar or the class jar, and then they earn a prize when they get to the top. And then you can play the teacher versus student game. And the way this works a little bit better with older kids. You can make the lesson a game between the teacher and the student. Anytime the students behave and they follow directions as a class, they get a tally mark. But every time someone interrupts or doesn't follow directions, the teacher gets a tally mark. And what you do is at the end of the class, whoever has the most tally marks, they get the prize. And so it would be something that's collective. We all get 5 minutes extra at recess today. Or, since the teacher won, you lose 5 minutes of recess time today. So that one, you don't even have to prepare for that. You just need a marker and a whiteboard, right? What's really great about these is that you don't have to reward behaviors. You reward behaviors immediately, but it's not the actual reward that they want. So it's adding to and giving them motivation to build up to that reward that they actually want. It shows them that their behaviors have consequences, and they can be good or they can be bad, and that they're in charge of that. The next one is correction and redirection. Because we implement these strategies, we tell them exactly what it is we want to see from them. We tell them what our rules are. We tell them what our expectations are, what the routines are. We measure that when they do what we've asked them to do. But remember, I told you guys yesterday, anytime you set an expectation or you establish a rule, you should fully expect that they're going to break the rule. You should fully expect that they are not going to meet the expectation. And you should use that and always anticipate that as a learning opportunity. So, yesterday we had a really great question. We have all these systems. We're measuring their good behaviors. What happens when they don't behave correctly? What do we do then? That's called behavior modification as well. So we have correction and redirection. Anytime a student does something we don't want them to do, whether it's good behavior, bad behavior or undesired behavior, we want to make sure that we correct them and then redirect them. And correction is simply telling them what the undesired behavior was. Okay, we identified that behavior for them. You did this, which was against the rules. And then we want to redirect them back to the behavior we want them to show. You were supposed to do this, so please next time do that. And remember that this is all in an effort to redirect them back to being on task. We're not trying to demean them. We're not trying to tell them how bad they are or how frustrated we are with them for not following our rules. We're trying to get them back on track. Okay? And if we can keep our emotions at a minimum with that, it's super easy. But if we get flustered, it then becomes more about how we feel versus how they act. And we're trying to change how they act. So there are a couple of ways that we can do this. We can use nonverbal and visible cues. These are really great when we're in the middle of a lesson and we don't want to stop our lesson to give a lecture. We want just a real quick acknowledgement that you're off task, right? Yesterday I had a teacher who said someone had interrupted a presentation. They were passing a toy. And I asked her, did you stop the presentation and address it verbally? And she said, yes. I told her, what do you have? Give me your stuff. My recommendation was, instead of stopping the presentation, let the presentation continue and do something that's nonverbal. So these would be the examples of what I would do in that situation, because I also don't want to stop the learning from happening either. So you can use proximity. Your body is a really good deterror of bad behaviors. If you see a kid kind of off task or looking around or messing with something and you go stand by them, immediately they put stuff away and they pay attention. It's like having a cop drive next to you, right? You're going to be on your best behavior when the authority is standing right next to you. And you don't even have to say anything. You just stand right next to them, you kind of give them a look, and you just wait there. And eventually they'll stop. Eventually they'll get back on task because you've drawn attention to their distraction. Another one that you can use is to tap on the student's desk. You can go up to them. This is like if I'm lecturing and I'm telling my students about something and I don't want to stop my thought process or their learning, I'll go up to a student, whoever it is, and I'll tap on their desk so that I immediately get their attention and I continue on with my discussion as I'm looking at them, so they know I'm talking to them. Another one is to have a code word that students understand. And this can be as a whole group, this could be with an individual student. I have a student that she gets a little excited, to say it in a nice way. She's very passionate. And when she gets too passionate, I will tell her, let's regulate a little bit, regulate. And she knows that means we need to turn it down a notch, right? We need to calm down, because she doesn't like being told to calm down. So I have that one word for her. But as a whole class, I could use that in a whole class setting. I could tell them, you guys need to regulate your volume. Or I could tell them, we've used this one in the past, you need a 6-inch voice versus an outdoor voice, right? So you can use a code word. And I realize that that's a verbal cue. I'm sorry. Anyway, and then you can hold eye contact with a student. When and my husband, he's funny because yesterday, if you went to his peanut butter and jelly lesson planning talk, he made the joke that he doesn't really have to have classroom management with discipline issues, because he really doesn't have discipline issues because he's a big guy. He looks very formidable, very intimidating, and kids don't really try him often. And if they do, they only do it once. But with me, he said, I'm really small and a woman and kind of timid sometimes, and kids try to take advantage of that. They want to see how far they can push me and how much they can get away with. And this is especially true with Sunday school teachers because, again, they only see us one day a week usually, and it's only for, an hour, a couple hours at a time. So there's really not a whole lot of motivation to behave correctly in the classroom. So we have to have strategies that help us to maintain that control of the classroom. So eye contact. This works with little kids, but also works with adults. If you hold eye contact with someone long enough, they will eventually look away because they're very uncomfortable, like Mrs. Gremling right now. So you can use that as sort of like a power move, right? That you stare them down and you talk directly to them as you're doing whatever it is you're doing, so they become uncomfortable and they realize, okay, maybe I should stop. It's not fun at that point, right? So you want to make it so that they are back on task no matter what, right? So it is an intimidation tactic, but one that's meant to keep them in the role of student, not distractor, right? And then also you can have a visual symbol that can be placed on a student's desk to remind the student to stop his or her behavior or to remain on task. I've seen teachers cut out little stop signs that says, stop, you're off task. And all they do is they put the little piece of paper on the student's desk as a visual reminder, and without even having to say you're off task, they know they're off task and that you've noticed it and you want them to get back on task. What's really, really important about the visual and nonverbal cues is that you have to teach them ahead of time. Staring a kid down, you don't really have to teach that. That's just kind of, like I said, a power move, an authority move, right? But the rest, if you say, when I tap on your desk, that means I want you to get back on task. Or if I stand next to you, that means you're not doing what I've asked you to do. You have to teach these things ahead of time and then practice them. And you can have the kids working, doing whatever they're doing, and then use one of the strategies and remind them of what the desired behavior is after you've done that strategy, and then they'll respond. All right. For the verbal cues for behavior, for the correction and redirection, would be to talk to the student. Draw attention to the undesired behavior, the rule that's being broken, the routine or procedure that's not being followed, and redirect the student to the desired behavior. You can say something like, student, you did not raise your hand. The routine is if you have something to say, you raise your hand and wait to be called on. Very easy. You're not adding any sort of emotion to it, so they're not going to feel ashamed or embarrassed or anything like that. You're just simply stating what they need to do. I use this often when students shout out answers. And sometimes they'll just shout it out and they don't care about the routine. I'll reinforce it and then they'll go, but blah, 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 right? And they don't even wait for me to call on them. So I make sure that I'm very clear about what I want them to do. And I stopped in and I said, well, that was a very good answer, but remember, the routine is you raise your hand and wait to be called on before you speak. And then we move on to the next question. There's no judgment, there's no reprimand, it's just simply correcting and redirecting. Another example would be to review the rules without drawing attention to the individual student. This works especially well with Sunday school because, again, they just don't see me often enough, and we get lots of new kids. We have kids that come one week and they're gone the next, and we have brand new kids that are visiting with a family member and they come to church for one weekend, and they really don't know the established routines and the rules and the expectations. So I review that immediately. When they enter the classroom, this happened just last week. I had a couple of girls that came from Socorro. They hadn't been in my class. They hadn't been to the church in a very long time. They're older girls who weren't used to the rigidity of our classroom and our structure. And they were very talkative when they first walked in the room. I knew that they were going to have a difficult time following my classroom procedures. They were very comfortable being exactly who they were. And so I had to reinforce the rules without drawing attention to them, because I didn't want to single them out and make them feel unwelcomed. So I did it with the whole class. Remember, class, that we have 3 rules. Raise your hand if you want to speak, wait to be called on, and stay in your seat. Can everyone follow these rules? Everyone gave me a thumbs up. I'm like, great, we all understand. And then when they broke the rule, I said, remember the 3 rules, because we reviewed them at the beginning of class. I set the expectation immediately, I reinforced it, and they didn't buck the system a whole lot. It happened once or twice, they apologized, and we went back to our lesson. Another one would be to redirect a small group or a whole class by stating the offense the students are committing and redirecting them to the desired behavior. I call this accountable talk. When a group of students are working together, and they're kind of working, but they're kind of not. They're doing what I asked them to do, but they're doing it really slowly, and they're gossiping more than anything, talking about their weekend, talking about fun facts, whatever. It's unrelated to the task. I will tell them that I do not hear accountable talk. I will say, I hear a lot of talk that's off topic. You guys need to get back on track. I use the phrase accountable talk because they know what that means. I let them know what accountable talk is. Anything that is regarding our assignment is accountable talk. If you're talking about anything but the assignment, that's not accountable talk. So that when I call them out and I say, your group is not exhibiting accountable talk, they know what that means. And then finally, I have on there, never argue with a student. Never, ever, ever. Even if they try. There are students who will try to backtalk. Don't worry about it. There are students who are going to try and justify their actions. Don't worry about it. The way you combat this is you say what it is, like the correct and redirect. You are doing this and you need to be doing this. Get back on task. If they say, yeah, but you repeat yourself. You were doing this, you need to be doing this. And it's sort of like the staring them down. If you say it often enough and over again, it's not fun anymore. They can't engage you in that argument, and they become embarrassed by their own actions and they stop. So don't argue, just repeat yourself. Now, if they still refuse to listen, that's an opportunity for you to say, you know what, I think you need some time in the hallway with the coordinator, or with Pastor Jim, or with Pastor Sean, or maybe you need to go sit outside and do the assignment on your own for a few minutes, right? Then you can intervene that way. But for the most part, repeating yourself will generally work with that combative student. But remember that even if we do send them out to the hall, even if we do send them to Pastor Sean, even if we do send them to a coordinator, the goal is not to just remove them from the classroom so they're not a distraction anymore for the rest of the students. The goal is to fix their behavior so then they can re-enter the classroom and continue on with the lesson. Because chances are, if they're being that disruptive, they probably need the lesson. And they need to be shown grace, what that looks like, to be forgiven, to redeem the time, and all of that good stuff. Now, we're moving on to positive and negative reinforcement. Positive and negative reinforcement is an immediate behavior modification. It reinforces good behavior, and it tries to reinforce or deter the bad behavior. Let's say that. So, positive and negative reinforcement are specific strategies that can aid in correction and redirection. They're used to address behaviors and learning immediately in the moment. We can use positive and negative reinforcement to help build the routines and expectations in our classroom so that we can maintain that positive learning environment without distractions. And it provides constant feedback to our students, okay? And then, of course, we always want to reinforce the behavior we want, not simply draw attention to the negative behavior that we don't want. And I'll show you what an example of that looks like in a minute. So these are the rewards that they get when they follow a routine, sort of like the sticker chart or the marble. These are tangible things that they can have immediately to reaffirm the good behaviors. So positive reinforcement in the classroom is motivating a student with something that they want. They want something from you, so they're going to give you what you want as well, right? It could be affirmation. A student answers a question correctly, you tell them that's correct. If they participate in an activity, you can give them a piece of candy. I do this in my classroom. Yesterday I talked about when my students first walk into the classroom for Sunday school, I have the big idea, I have the memory verse, I have the question. I want them to be motivated to write that. In fact, I have a student who's not motivated to write that, and I'll talk about that when we get to the negative reinforcements. But I want them to work quickly and diligently and to engage in that activity. So what I tell them is, as soon as, remember how we talked about those if and then statements, or when and then statements? I will tell them, when you have finished filling out all of your paper with the material on the board and answering the question, you can show me and I'll give you a cookie, or I'll give you a piece of candy, or I'll give you a sucker, whatever I have to give them at the moment. Now, I don't use these all the time. I use these when my class feels like they're not motivated, or when I have a particularly difficult group, or when I have a group of new kids that come to service and they haven't built up those routines yet. I do that so that they learn that they can engage and they can have buy-in even before it's intrinsic. I give them the extrinsic reward first. You can also use stickers. Little kids love stickers. Older kids love stickers still, I've noticed. Praise. You did such a good job following that rule. Or high five. Kids like high fives. Air high fives, right? They think it's funny. Anything like that that reinforces the positive behavior. Negative reinforcement is motivating a student by removing or withholding something that they want, or the absence of a positive reinforcement. This is different from negative reinforcement, like you give them a punishment. We're not giving them a punishment, we're just withholding the positive reinforcement for this particular type of negative reinforcement. And it's crucial that the negative reinforcement is not used to demean or belittle the student. We're not going to say, well, that was a stupid question. We're not going to say, well, why are you acting so childish? That's demeaning. That's negative reinforcement in the bad sense, right? We want negative reinforcement in reminding them what they could have had, but they now lost, and how they can get it if they want it. That's what we're looking for. So I have some examples here. Misuse of negative reinforcement. You might hear something that sounds like this. I was going to give you a sticker, but you were out of your seat running around, so I'm drawing attention to the negative behavior. Maybe you won't act bad next time. And then I'm adding emotion to it. I'm describing it as being bad, right? Instead of just telling them what they should have done right. This example draws attention to and reinforces the negative behavior that's undesired. So the student is probably likely to do it again, because all you're telling them is you're bad, and you're not telling them how to fix it. Instead, a correct use of negative reinforcement might sound like this. Remember that we must be in our seats to earn a sticker. Next time, make sure you're seated so I can give you one. You're still not giving them the sticker, but you're still reinforcing the good behavior that you want and telling them what they'll get if they do it, right? So you're helping to motivate them. This draws attention to and reinforces the positive behavior that you desire so that the students are more likely to do it next time. They want what you have. Now, I'm going to pause for just a moment, and we're going to talk about that student that just, regardless of what you do, they don't care about stickers, they don't care about candy, they don't care about how they're disrupting the class, they're not motivated by much. You're going to have those students. And sometimes it's pure behavior, they're just defiant, in which case, if you've tried a couple of things and they're just not responding and they're causing a scene, go ahead and send them out. Get them out of the classroom so that the rest of the class can move on with the lesson and someone else can handle the behavior. You want to make sure that as much as possible, as much as you're capable, that you keep all of the authority in your classroom, because you want to maintain that control. You want to be the authority figure in the classroom. You don't want to defer to anybody else and hand over that control to another person, because then you've lost control in your classroom with that particular student. And that's when we see the kids start to kind of like team up, and they start to work together to go against you and make things really chaotic. We don't want that, right? We want to maintain control in our classroom. But in the event that we have a student that is just belligerent or irate or super distractive or causing a scene, you can send them out and you can have them talk to somebody else so that they're removed from the classroom. But then there's also students who it's not necessarily a behavior problem, it's a learning problem. For example, I have a student in Sunday service that he was 10 years old, and he acts out quite often in class. And it's usually during the time that they're copying stuff off the board. And I will remind him, he's been in my class for a year now, and I'll remind him, you need to copy down the big idea, you need to copy down the memory verse, you need to look up the verse in the Bible and write down the memory verse, and then you need to answer the question. He never does it. And for a little while, I thought he's just being defiant. And I started to build a relationship with him because I've noticed that if you can make the disruptive kid your friend, they're less likely to be disruptive because they want to please you. You need to make them your buddy. And so I would kind of buddy up to him and ask him about his day, be a little bit more personable with him. And he responded to that, but he still wouldn't do the assignment. And instead, he would crumple up his paper and throw it away. Or he would break the lead on the point of his pencil. Or he would play with his cowboy hat. Or he would try to tell me a story. And then I realized one day, as we were doing our assignment, that he couldn't find the book in the Bible. Even though he could tell me where it was, he couldn't find it. And he was helping out. And another time to put stamps on papers, and he couldn't tell if the writing was right side up or upside down. I realized that this kid couldn't read at 10 years old. So in that case, I know he's never going to be able to complete the task that I want him to complete. And we do it every Sunday. So instead, I take another approach, because the whole goal isn't so that he can write everything down. It's so that he can learn about what he's writing down. So he can learn the memory verse, he can learn the big idea, he can answer my question and participate in the class. So instead of having him write it, I would tell him, hey, tell me what the big idea is. Tell me what the memory verse is. Tell me what the answer to your question is. And I'd let him do it orally. And then I would give him the candy. And he liked that. He wanted to earn it. He just didn't have the means to do it. And so I created an opportunity for him to be successful just like everybody else. And guess what? His classroom disruptions went down tremendously because he was acting out to avoid being found out that he couldn't read. So sometimes we have to be aware of what our students are dealing with, what their learning styles are, what their disabilities are, what's going on at home, and what insecurities they might be presenting in class. So we have to be mindful of that, not to just dish out a consequence, but to truly think about, what does this individual student need? Encouragement, redirection, correction, discipline, what is it? Okay, so back to the handout here. Now, we've talked about that immediate reinforcement. We talked about that long-term behavior management strategies of using stickers to chart progress. But now we're going to talk about, once they've done all that, once they've earned their reward, what kind of rewards do we give them? And what kind of consequences do we give them? So rewards and consequences are different from positive and negative reinforcement in that they are the end result awarded after the continued use of reinforcement. We've reinforced the positive behaviors with the stickers, and now they've earned it. We've reinforced the positive behaviors with the marshmallows, and now they've earned something. For example, many elementary classes use the sticker charts to track positive behavior in the classroom, which will ultimately end up with a reward. Right? We have to give them something at the end for their hard work. Likewise, many classrooms use the red, yellow, green charts to track mistakes in the classroom. So one tracks positive behavior, one tracks negative behavior, right? And there's a reward for one and there's a consequence for the other. So once they reach these two levels, we have to decide, what do we do next? What's our course of action? So the rewards, like I said, they're the ends to the means, right? The system that we use, they're the end result. They might get extra time at recess. They might get a special snack. They might get to sit in a special spot in the classroom. Maybe you have a desk that it's like the special desk that's decorated and everybody wants to sit in it. Little kids love that, right? Or sitting next to the teacher. It depends on if they like the teacher or not. That might be a consequence. Maybe a certificate or an award, a prize out of a treasure box, being the teacher's helper for the day, for the kids that are motivated by that. Or extra time doing something that they like being able to read a book, draw a picture, play with a toy. It doesn't have to cost us anything. It can be just time or experiences, right? Drawing special attention to them, giving them a sticker on their shirt that says, awesome student of the week, or something like that. Little kids really love that. But we want to make sure that anytime we give them those rewards, they actually earn it, and we remind them why they earned it. You're getting this reward because everyone did this. It took us so many weeks to fill up our marshmallow jar. Let's see if we can do it in less time next time. And we want to reinforce that. Now, the examples of consequences, because there have to be consequences. We can't just give rewards and ignore the negative behavior and never give a consequence. There must be consequences for their actions. In Sunday school, this could be talking to the coordinator or talking to the children's church pastor. So if you're doing ministry work in our kids' church, you might say, go talk to Mr. V or go talk to Pastor Jim. It might be loss of recess or free time, or that reward that they were going to get. Now make sure that if they actually do earn the reward, they should get the reward, but maybe you withhold with that negative reinforcement whatever they were going to get the first time. Detention for older kids. Now you have to stay a few minutes after class or after school or whatever it is. Physical activity. Now, I wrote physical activity. What that means is basically something that they don't want to do. Push-ups, wall sits, what else would you do? Jumping jacks. I would not recommend this for kids' church just because we don't know what kind of homes or families our kids come from. We don't know if their parents would be okay with that. Some parents aren't. But in our school especially, this is a very effective means of consequence in the classroom. Especially in my classroom, because like I said, I'm small, I'm a woman, all my students are taller than me, and especially the boys. Some of them are as big as my husband. So taking authority from me, taking discipline and correction from me is a little humbling, and they don't want to do it. But I let them know that it doesn't matter if they like it or not. It doesn't matter if they're bigger than me or not. I'm the authority and they are not. They're to be submissive to that. And the way I reinforce that, especially I have this problem with young teenage boys, especially ones that are still pretty immature, where they don't want to obey and they think it's funny. So I'll give them a consequence that I know is going to assert my authority and show that they are subservient to that they have to obey. So one boy in particular, he likes to say things under his breath, or he likes to talk back, and I immediately go to push-ups. Do 30 push-ups. 30 push-ups, I can do 30. Oh, good, make it 50. And until he stops, he does push-ups. And if he stops and he's still talking, you need to do 30 more, please. And that just reinforces that he's doing the work and receiving the consequence for his behaviors, and that he controls that. That if he doesn't want to do push-ups, he doesn't challenge my authority. And more often than not, after the first round, he won't say anything, even if he wants to. He's gotten better with it. But it's a really easy way of reinforcing that authority in the classroom. So if you're in a class where you're given that permission to do that, it's a really effective tool to use to reassert your authority. But for kids' church, our heart at kids' church is to teach the love of Jesus. And if we're constantly giving them consequences, like, oh, you're going to do wall sits, and we make it uncomfortable for them, or if we make it unenjoyable for them, they're probably not going to want to come back. We want to keep them in our classrooms. We want them to be excited to come to our classrooms. So we want to use consequences that are not going to make them feel embarrassed, or that aren't going to make them feel uncomfortable, and that way they'll want to come back. So it's better to use positive reinforcement and positive rewards for those kids. So the last one there is call home to parents. You can call parents out of service if you need to. If it gets that bad and the coordinator can't get them to behave, or they come back to class and they're still misbehaving, you can ask that they call their parents and use that as a threat, but follow through with it. If you do this again, I will call your parents and you will be leaving my classroom. And sometimes that's a really good motivator. One thing I would like to say, though, is that whenever we're giving rewards and consequences, we want to make sure that we always maintain and reinforce the hope we have in our students. I know you can do this. I know you know what the right way to act is. I know that you can do it. I've seen you do it. And then look for opportunities when they are acting appropriately and praise them for it. Even if it's just to say, hey, thank you for following the rule of raising your hand. Or I saw that you finished the task early. Good job. And show them that you see not just their negative behavior, but also their positive behavior. Because kids like attention. And if they don't get it in a positive way, they will look for it in a negative way. So if you can reinforce the positive attention rather than the negative attention, your class will be a lot smoother, right? A lot more enjoyable. Also, at the bottom there I say, before any consequence is given, students should always be given an opportunity to correct their behavior using the correction, redirection, and positive negative reinforcement. For example, if a student has their head down and he or she is not paying attention, you might give them the choice to either sit up or stand up, and then remind them that the rule states that you do your best job. You correct and redirect. If the student continues to put his or her head down, make the choice for him and make him stand, while warning him that his behavior will likely lead to a consequence. If he continues to distract or be disruptive, give him a consequence. And then this process allows you not only to reinforce the desired behavior, it also allows you to reinforce the authority in your classroom, which is you. So a student, if all you say is, you know what, you shouted out, get out of my class, they don't have an opportunity to correct their behavior, which is what you want. You don't want to get rid of the problem, you want to fix the problem. So if you give them an opportunity to fix it, and you show grace in that way, they may or may not fix it, but at least you've given them a chance, right? You've shown them that you are giving them an opportunity to do better, and that you believe that they can do better. I can tell you that if your automatic go-to is punishment every single time, they're gonna continue their negative behavior. They don't see any hope or any reason or any motivation for why they should try and please you with their behaviors, because all you do is punish them. So we gotta make sure that we are trying to give them opportunities to fix their mistakes. Now, we had the discussion yesterday about, I gave you the example of if a student does poorly on an assignment, I would probably give them an opportunity to fix it. Sometimes they take advantage of our second chances, right? Sometimes they use that second chance to the third, fourth, fifth, sixth infinity if you let them, right? And they continue to cross that boundary. When that happens, that's an indicator that that boundary was not set strongly enough, and you need to enforce it. You need to give them a consequence. A second chance, absolutely. But you remind them of what will happen if they do it again. You did this, that's not what I want you to do, I want you to do this. Please make sure that you fixed your behavior. They do it again, now we have a consequence. Because you knew what the expectation was, I reminded you of what the expectation was, and you still crossed the line, now there's a consequence. I can tell you, like a 3 strikes you're out sort of thing, really effective. Because that tells them, I mess up one more time, I'm done. I'm not going to go and have a little chat with the teacher. I'm not going to get a slap on the wrist and not get a candy. I'm gonna get a real consequence. So I need to adjust my behavior. And this is all done in the classroom. This is before you even get anyone else involved. So we can reinforce our authority in the classroom by making sure we reinforce those rules, those expectations, reminding them of what they are. And you know what's really great about that is when we do that, we remove emotion from it, not just from the kid, but also from ourselves. We no longer have to be frustrated because the rules are the rules. The expectation is the expectation. You either follow it or you don't. You either get the reward or you get the consequence. That has nothing to do with me, that has everything to do with my students. I'm just making sure that it's being enforced, right? They're in charge of them and whatever they do, however they act. And the consequence is directly correlated to what they do. So it's not me being mean to them, it's them earning what they deserve, right? So let's move on to attention grabbers. On the back, we have attention grabbers. This is a really great classroom management, behavior management strategy for the whole class. We need our students to have opportunities where they can learn from each other, they can work together on an assignment, they can collaborate with each other and do a craft together. We want them to have fun, we want them to have fellowship and to socialize and build those skills of how to work together and be part of a team. But we also want it to be controlled. We don't want complete chaos. So when they're working and we need to get their attention, they're off task or they're too loud, or we just need to give them further instructions, we need to end the activity, whatever it is, we can use some of these cues to help get their attention quickly and have them fully engaged in whatever it is we're about to say. And I've used these with older kids and younger kids. It works on everyone. Visual, verbal, and nonverbal cues or signals that will get students immediate attention. You can do a 1, 2, 3 freeze. I really like this one. You have to teach all of these, by the way. 1, 2, 3 freeze works very effectively when you practice it often and you make it sort of like a game. And you tell the kids, okay, I'm going to count to 3. I'm going to say 1, 2, 3, freeze. And when I say freeze, you stop what you're doing. And of course, little kids, they're very dramatic. Older kids are too, where they try to pose and they're frozen, right? And then if someone talks like, well, you're not very good at freezing, remember, when I say freeze, you stop talking, you stop moving. And that's even like shuffling papers. I'll have kids that'll still be like you're not freezing, and they'll stop. And I just draw again. I draw attention to the behavior that they're doing that I don't want them to do, and I'm reinforcing what I do want them to do. This one's it's a really great way of making that kind of attention getter or grabber fun for them, because you can have them moving around the room and you can practice it. Okay, when I say 1, 2, 3, freeze, you're going to stop wherever you are, and then you do it. And it's almost like a game of, what is it? Freeze tag. Yeah, we just have to freeze, right? So it's a really good strategy. They like it. You can do clapping patterns like and then they repeat it back to you. You have to teach that, but that's a really great way of them knowing when we do that pattern, that means that your attention is on me, and you tell them what the expectation is. When we do the clapping pattern, you do it back, but if they start talking again, then it's not effective. So you have to tell them, when we do that, that means I want your attention on me and I want you quiet and not moving, whatever your expectation is. You can do callouts. Mr. Gremling has a callout that he uses all the time, and we hear it all the time, but it's good, it's effective. You do Silencio Bruno, right? And they say back, Silencio Bruno, and they love it. So it could be anything. You can do finger or hand signals. Everyone knows what this is, right? Well, in our school, bathroom. And I'll be talking, giving a lecture, and I'll have a kid go like this, and I'll know that they want the bathroom, and I'll either say, or, well, I'm talking, and I don't even have to say anything to address them. They just go or they wait. You can also do this. This one usually means quiet. This one's a little harder to get when the kids are really loud in a big group because they have to see it. But if you do this, it means that everyone's supposed to do this also, and if they're doing this, they should not be talking, and they should be quiet. You can do symbolic meanings behind each of your fingers. So number 1 means sit in your seat. Number 2 means stop talking. Number 3 means whatever it is, right? And all 5 fingers means attention is on me, whatever your signal is, whatever they mean. So you can have hand signals. You can flick the lights. I don't like this one, but some people do. It's an immediate attention getter. They notice when you flick the lights, and you can tell them, you can train them, that means that you stop moving, stop speaking. You can ring a bell for the same thing. Catch a bubble in your mouth is really effective with little kids, because if you tell them, oh, we're going to catch a bubble in our mouth, they can't talk when they do it, so they're instantly quiet. They love it. Our little K4, K5 kids walk around in their lines with a bubble in their mouth, and they're not allowed to speak, and they won't because they want to follow the rule, and they're supposed to keep their bubble in their mouth. And then I like to use, with really large groups that are very loud, I use the if you can hear me strategy, and the way this works is you talk kind of quietly, and you'll say, if you can hear me, pat your head. If you can hear me, pull your ear. If you can hear me, hop on one foot. And what happens is the kids that can hear me will start to do it, and the kids that are around them are like, why are you doing that? And then they start to do it because they catch on, like, oh, she's trying to get our attention. And then finally, and if you can hear me, cover your mouth with your hand. Or catch a bubble in your mouth, but that's funnier to me. So it's very effective when you're trying to get a whole group, lots of varying ages. It works really well for all of them. Anyone can do it. And it's fun. It's like a game. They like it. You can also use cues to get your students to transition quickly, quietly, and orderly. Remember yesterday we talked about when we are transitioning from one activity to another, we want to make sure that we have as little downtime as possible because any downtime will lead to chaos, and we want to reduce that as much as possible. So even my transitions are structured. I tell them what I want them to do it, when I want them to do it, and how I want them to do it. And if they don't do it that way, they're not following the procedure, and I reinforce what the procedure is. I might even have them go back to where they were and practice it again to reinforce it. So some of the ones that I like to use, this one always seems to work. I start to count down from 5. I will give the direction of what I want them to do and count down. So I say, I need your attention in 5-4. That means everyone's looking at me and they're quiet. I need you in your seats at 3-2. Now they're instructed to sit down. And I need your eyes on me, ready to listen at 1. Now I have everyone's attention, they're all sitting in their seats. I gave them the 5 seconds to do it, and I do it slowly, of course, so that I can make sure that they all get to participate appropriately. If I count down really fast, and then I get mad at them because they're not in their seats in time, that's not fair. So I try to make it, as long as they're really trying, I try to make sure that I give them enough time. And I wrote on there, you always count down. There was another teacher who tried to use this strategy, but she counted up, and it could have gone on forever. It didn't matter what she counted to. And so I told her, hey, you should count down, because everyone knows that when we get to 1, there's nothing left. Like, that's it. We're not going to go into negatives or anything. So she started counting down, and it was a lot more effective, right? And there's that sense of urgency when you start counting. Kids don't like it. Right? And especially with little kids, when we say, okay, I'm going to give you 3 seconds, 1, 2, they really try to push that boundary, but you only have 3 seconds to get over here. 3, 2, that's a little bit more urgent, right? And before I let them transition, before I let them move, I always say, when I say go. Because there's nothing like telling the kids, you have 30 seconds to turn in your paper, sit down, and get back to reading your book before they jump up and they're like trying to rush around. We don't want that. We want control. We want orderly, because our God is a God of order, not of chaos, right? So I always tell them, when I say go, this is what you'll do. So when I say go, you're going to turn in your papers, you're going to sit down, and you're going to start copying off of the board. Ready? Go. And they get up, they're super quiet, they do what they need to do, they sit down, and they're back to work. No big deal. I'll also do a countdown. It's very arbitrary, doesn't even matter where you start, really. I'll tell them, you have 30 seconds to quietly get back to your seats when I say go, and then I'll start counting down. Or I'll just start counting down after I've given instructions. You're going to have 5 minutes to complete this task. You need to get out your stuff and start working. 30, 29, and as soon as I start counting, they know it's time to get to work, because they know I only have 30 seconds because she's counting down. So that must mean that at 1, I better be in my seat doing what I'm supposed to do. And again, always count down. And then sometimes what'll happen is I'll start counting, and they'll do it in like 10 seconds, and I just stop. I don't have to count down all the way. I can even skip a few numbers. If they're moving quickly and I can tell they're going to be finished before I get to 1, I won't even finish counting. They complete the task, and the transition time is over. Yesterday we talked about how we can use music in our classroom to help maintain a calm environment and an orderly environment. And one way we could do that is by saying, this song is 8 minutes long, if it's Oceans, right? You have until the end of the song to be finished with your assignment. And I'll play the song, and they know when that song is over, they need to be finished. And so it's a way of measuring how much time they have. It's a constant reminder that their time is ticking down. And they know, if it's something that they're familiar with, they know when they're nearing the end, and I don't have to remind them. I also suggested, my son, who's 8 years old, has a really hard time with time management, and I give him timers at home. You have 5 minutes to finish this handout. You have 10 minutes to finish reading those so many pages. And I start a timer, And I mentioned to his teacher that it was effective at home. She started doing it in the classroom for him, and all the kids started doing it within the time too. So it ended up being a classroom strategy that she used for all of the kids, where she put a timer up on her TV screen, and the kids knew exactly how much time they had. Now, that does add a little bit of stress to the kids who are slow workers, but you know what? That's okay. It's a motivator. And then, of course, you have to have grace. If they're almost done and there's no more time left, and they just need to finish this last one real quick, you can give them grace and let them finish it. The last part of our behavior management is equitable distribution. Now, this might seem like an odd one to use, making sure that all the kids participate, but it does help everything stay orderly, and it does make sure that every student is engaged. Because remember, our goal is to teach every student whatever the lesson is, especially if it's about Jesus, right? We want them all engaged. So how do we keep them all engaged without harping on particular students for not participating, and making it so that it doesn't feel like we're picking on them, and so that we don't have that one student that answers all the questions, right? Because we have those kids, the really high achievers, that they know all the answers, they want to help with all of the tasks. We need to give everyone an equal opportunity to be successful in our classroom and to participate. So that's why we're talking about equitable distribution. So this keeps everyone engaged and on task. We want them all to learn and to participate. And by having strategies for picking who participates and answers questions, it keeps the students engaged because they don't know who's going to be chosen next. So you really don't want to do, like, if you say, well, we're going to go in alphabetical order. That can be effective sometimes. But what that does is it tells every person that goes after them that they don't have to be engaged until it's their turn. And if they've already gone, they don't have to be engaged afterwards because they've already gone, right? So a student not knowing when they're going to be selected or if they're going to be selected will keep them engaged because they don't want to be called on and not know what's going on or not know what the answer is, right? For the most part. So strategies you can use to help with that are popsicle sticks. You write their name on a popsicle stick, on a plastic spoon, on any sort of object. You stick them in a cup and you ask a question and you let them think about it for a second and you pull out a stick and whoever's name on it, they get to answer. And then you can either replace that stick or you can put it off to the side and let another person be selected next time. And you can do that with any sort of object. I like to do random number generators because it's a little bit more grown up for the high school kids and for the older kids. And what I do is I just assign them a number in their seat, like you're number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, all the way to the end. And then I get a random number generator off of the internet and click the little button, like, okay, says number 7. So I'm not choosing, it's totally random. They get to go when they're selected. That has nothing to do with whether I know they did the assignment or not, right? And they can't argue with that. You can use unique personal qualities. So if you have blue eyes, stand up. You're going to give the answer for question, whatever. If you are a boy, you're going to stand up. You're going to give the answers for the question. If your birthday is in February, you're going to stand up. So you can use the individual qualities of the student that are totally random, and that helps you to avoid, having a natural draw to a specific student or avoiding specific students, right? Because you don't necessarily always know about that. That also helps you to target specific students. So if there are students that just refuse to participate and you lump them together in a category where they're in a collective, it makes it fair for everyone in that group. So they have to answer, otherwise they're being unfair to their peers, right? So if you have a redhead in your class and there's just 2 of them, and you said, if you have red hair, stand up, you're giving the answer, they have to answer because otherwise they're going to put all of the weight on the other person. You can also do this with numbered desk objects or color-coded objects, kind of in the same way. I've seen cups with like little flags, little pennant flags with numbers on them, and each desk has one, and you'll say, okay, all the number 4s, like if you have them in pods or at tables, all the number 4s stand up. You're going to give the answer. You can do color-coded desks. All of the kids with a red sticky note, you're going to stand up and give the answers. So it's a way of taking it away from their personal qualities and making it a little bit more random. And then something that I do often that is really effective for my students is one where they all have to participate. If we're reviewing something or if we are giving answers to some sort of brainstorming activity we're doing, like what's a synonym for devoted, I will tell them, okay, everyone stand up. And they can't sit down until they give me a synonym. And some of them, if they're at the end, they know they don't want to be last, because by that time, everyone has already taken all the answers. So what they do instead is they want to be first, right? And they will. And some kids, they need that, because what that helps to do is model for the other kids that really don't know what the word means to kind of figure it out as other kids are giving answers, right? So they're kind of learning from other people's background knowledge. It's a really great strategy for those kids that are timid and just like don't have enough experience to be able to answer the question, to kind of get the gist of what's going on, and then provide a meaningful answer and have some wait time to be able to figure it out, right? But again, the expectation is you don't sit down until you give me an answer. So if you don't know, you have to guess. And it has to be an educated guess, right? We can't just do some crazy answers. And then if they really don't know, I'll start to give them some delving questions. I will rephrase or give examples so that they can come up with an answer that makes sense to them, right? But at this point, they've heard everybody's answers. They kind of have an idea, so they've learned something from that activity. And then finally, popcorn picking. This one gives the kids a little bit more freedom to choose. So I will start off by saying, who would like to read today? And if no one raises their hand, I'll choose someone. But they know that if I choose them first, they get to choose next. This is also really good for students who are eager to read, to always read. I will always have a volunteer in some of my classes, and I always know who it's going to be. That gives me an opportunity to let them get that out of the way. They choose the next person, and that becomes a little bit more random because they get to choose who goes next, and we really don't know who they're going to choose. Or it'll keep people on their toes because they know this one person is going to choose them next, so they better be listening to what's going on in our story or whatever we're doing. And that way, I'm not picking, they're taking ownership over their learning, and they're being a little bit more responsible, having some autonomy there. So at the end of our discussion, it says, teachers do not need to utilize every classroom management and behavior modification strategy. You don't have to do all of these. In fact, you shouldn't do all of these. What you should do, rather, is try a couple of them out to determine which strategies fit your teaching style and your classroom and fit your students' learning. If you're teaching really, really little kids and you're trying to do the stand-up, sit-down one, it's probably not going to work well because they're probably not going to understand the concept of I'm standing to give an answer and I can't sit down until I give an answer. That's a big task for them. But they probably will understand, like the popcorn picking. Okay, you spoke, now choose someone else to speak. That's an easy thing for them to do. So make sure that it's something that you can build as a habit in your classroom, that you're going to stick to it, and that they can do it developmentally, that they're going to understand how to do it, and then practice it. And if we keep doing these strategies and we keep reinforcing those expectations, those rules like we were talking about yesterday, we're going to have a classroom where the kids know exactly what to expect all the time. And you can be out of the classroom and they still know what to do. Doesn't mean that they'll do it, but they will know what to do. My kids know that when they walk into my classroom every day for English class, there is bell work up on the board, and they look for it. Some kids, they'll immediately start it. And when I walk into the classroom, if I walk behind them and I see that they're not doing what I've asked them to do, I draw attention to the kids that are doing what I've asked them to do. I see that some of you guys have started your bell work. Thank you for starting. Those of you that haven't started, you need to start your bell work. And they immediately stop what they're doing, they get started. So if we reinforce these often enough, and if we're consistent and we're doing it with grace, our students will start to comply. They'll become comfortable with those routines, and they will fall in line with those routines. They'll be effective. Sound good? All right. I don't know when I'm supposed to be done. Does anyone know? 10:40? Oh, I went over time. I'm sorry. All right, let's pray. Heavenly Father, we thank you so much for the discussion we just had. I pray, Lord, that you would help these strategies to be helpful to the teachers that are in this room. I pray, Father, that they would be easy to implement. I pray, Lord, that they would make their teaching experience and the students' learning experience much more effective and enjoyable, and that it would make serving you easy, Lord. I pray, Father, that you would go before us, that you would help us to remain faithful to the strategies that we select, and that we would have discernment to know what we should use and what we shouldn't. And I pray that it would benefit us by us learning about you more. I pray, Father, that you would help our students be receptive to these strategies, and I pray that it would aid them as well, Lord. You're so good to us, and we love you. It's in your holy, precious name we pray. Amen.